Hello, today is October 4th, 2016. My name is William Winkle. This interview is for the Detroit Historical Society's Detroit 67 Oral History Project, and I am up in Harrison Township, and I'm sitting down with Mr. Phil Johnson. Thank you so much for sitting down with me today.
Oh, you're welcome.
Can you please start by telling me where and when were you born?
I was born in Detroit, March 31st, 1938.
What neighborhood did you grow up in?
The east side of Detroit, near in the Denby High area.
What was it like growing up in that neighborhood?
Fine. No problem.
Was it an integrated neighborhood at the
It
time?
was not. No, I never went to school. I went to three of my schools: Wayne School, Jackson, and Detroit, and Denby. And I never. There was no African Americans in the schools that I recall.
Growing up on the east side, did you tend to stay in your own neighborhood or did you venture around the city growing up?
No, just same neighborhood. Yeah.
So growing up in the 1940s, do you have any, you were really young then, but do you have any memories from 43, with the 43 race riots?
I do not.
Okay.
Yeah.
So growing up in the 40s and in the 50s, did you find Detroit welcoming? As you were getting older, did you move around the city more?
No, we stayed right there. I stayed living with my parents in a house on Nottingham till we got married in 61.
What did you do after high school?
After high school, I went to work for the phone company, downtown Detroit.
What drew you to working at the phone company?
At first, I worked down in the mailroom at 1365 Cass, where the main building was. And then I went out into the field, and I was a cable splicer's helper and a lineman.
And the telephone company you're talking about is Michigan Bell?
Yes. Yep. That was before somebody brought a lawsuit and broke up all the phone companies. And they couldn't, they didn't want them to have a monopoly on the phone service. So somebody went to court and they broke them all up into smaller companies.
Skipping back a little bit, in the 1950s, did you notice any growing tension in the city?
I did not.
Okay.
No. No, I didn't. I graduated in 56 and I never really realized any problems.
Between 56 and 61, did you leave the city at all?
I worked for the phone company for about a year and a half. Then I went to work for the city of Detroit, the public lighting department. And shortly after I went to work for them, maybe a couple months, I went into the Navy. Because when I was in high school, I joined the Navy Reserve, which they had. They met at Broadhead Naval Armory near Belle Isle. And so it was a 6-year plan. You had 4 years of reserve and 2 years of active duty. So shortly after I went to work for the city, I went in to do my 2 years active duty. And then when I got out in 59, I went right back to work for the city. And then I got my apprenticeship as a lineman, and I did the apprenticeship for the city, and then I became a journeyman and just kept working for the city until about 1976.
going back, when you left the city for 2 years, and then when you were finished with your service in '59, did the city still seem the same to you when you came back?
Oh yeah, no problem. Yeah.
And in '61, when you moved out of your parents' home after you got married, where'd you move to?
We just moved a couple blocks over. We moved on to Greensboro, which is 2 streets over.
And did you stay in the city because you were a city employee, or?
I stayed there because that was one of the requirements.
Mm-hmm.
But I did move out and still maintain a city resident address.
So, going into the '60s, as you're becoming a journeyman, what year did you become a journeyman?
Let's see, it must have been early 60s. Was a 4-year program,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I got my apprenticeship maybe around 1960, 61. So probably 64 or 65.
Going into the mid '60s and later in the '60s, did you notice any tension then?
I did not. Even during the riot or before and after. I mean, we had African Americans working for the city,
Mm-hmm.
and even on the same crew and in the public lighting, and I really didn't notice any tension. I just accepted them as, they're human beings, and worked side by side with them.
So going into '67, then, how did you first hear what was going on that Sunday?
Well, I really don't know. Probably by listening to the news.
And were you called into work on that Sunday, or was it
No.
a later response?
I just went to work on Monday morning to my warehouse on St. Jean, right where Wayne County Community College has a facility there now. And but I don't think they let us go out into the field. They just kept us right there.
Was there a lot of apprehension by either yourself or your coworkers about going into the field?
I do not feel any. I did not feel any. So this was going on, so just have to accept it.
Mm-hmm. What was the response of your superiors?
I really don't remember. I don't. I really never had any apprehension at all. I just accepted it, and we knew they would keep me over on the afternoon shift in case. See, at that time, the way the public light was set up, they had crews, 3, 4, 5-man crews that would go out and do the construction work on the city's power system. But that all came to a halt because of the riot going on. They didn't want people going out into the field unless they were escorted by the police or the military. So at that time, they had an afternoon shift and a midnight shift. They were one-man crews. And they would mostly do trouble work if there were something happened that would cause the system to power to a school or a library, or something, if that would get something would happen, or if the street lighting, something would happen to those circuits, then the trouble crews on afternoons and midnights would go out. If they could fix it, they would fix it. So they wanted to double these crews up. there was only usually one guy on the east side of Detroit and one guy on the west side of Detroit. So they kept me over on the afternoon shift to work with the afternoon guy. And we wouldn't go out in the field either unless there was an escort going with us. And I really only remember going out one time in that week that they kept us over. There was apparently a garage fire that burnt some wires up, and so we had to go and fix that.
So, did you spend most of your time during the unrest hunkered down, or did you eventually have to go out?
We would just stay at the warehouse
Mm-hmm.
there in St. Jean until something would come in that you had to go fix, then we would go out and try to fix it.
What were some of the things that you had to go out and fix?
Like I say, the only thing I remember us having to do was fix the wire that was burnt up,
Mm-hmm.
caused by the garage fire. And at that time, the city had their own street lighting system, their own power system for the public buildings, for the police stations, fire stations, libraries, schools. And so they didn't have transformers real close to traffic signals at that time. Sometimes they would have to run a lot of wire to feed a traffic signal because there's just not a transformer on every pole like there is now. Their transformers were on their power system, and sometimes it was several blocks from a traffic signal location. So they had to run a lot of wire from the transformer to the intersection that had the traffic signal. And that wire is what got burned up from that garage fire. And so we had to go fix that. But that's really the only thing other than those pictures. We had some wire we had to put back up there, but that's really about the only times that we went out into the field is when there was a problem.
When you went out in the field and you were accompanied by the National Guard or the Army, did any incidents happen with them?
I do not remember any incidents. I never saw any problems, and I guess most of the problems did happen during the night.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and there, I just don't remember any. I do, yeah, I just don't recall any. I never saw any unrest. I never saw anybody lighting fires. I do remember at our warehouse, when we were staying at the warehouse at night, when I was working with this guy on afternoons, I do remember hearing tracer bullets going through the air above our warehouse. And I don't know who was doing the shooting,
Mm-hmm.
but I do remember the tracers. You could just hear them go through the air.
Given hearing that, how long were your work shifts? 12 to 16 hours that week?
During the day it was 8 to 4, and during the afternoons it was 4 to midnight.
Okay.
So there was some night times that I was there, and that's when I would hear the tracers.
Mm-hmm. And then traveling to and from work. If you worked the afternoon shift and you were there till midnight, would you sleep there?
No, I would stay there from 8 in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
do my regular shift, and then stay the extra 8 hours and do the afternoon shift.
And then you would go home?
Yeah.
Did you feel comfortable going between the station and your home at midnight, given that you said most of everything, the tracer bullets and everything like that was happening at night?
It was, but I know several times I rode my motorcycle, but it was right down 94 to home, and I do not remember any problems getting from home to work or from work to home.
How was there a great deal of work to do after the unrest settled down? Was there a great deal to fix?
I'm sure there was, because, well, those few pictures there showed whole area devastated by fire. And I'm sure there were poles and wires, and usually there were Edison wires and our wires that were that had damage, and so I really don't remember working anything extra after the week of the riot was over. I just don't remember. Hey, I'm old, okay?
Well, just my final few questions being, did you see the city any differently after 67? Like, it looks physically different, but did you feel any different about the city afterwards?
It was I think probably about that time that Coleman Young initiated the cross-district busing.
Coleman Young was mayor 7 years later.
Okay, well, it was during that time that I noticed that, boy, people were moving out of the city. And there was, I don't remember that, but I presume there was a lot of vacant homes then. People would just pick up and walk away, leave the city, because they didn't want their kids to be involved in the cross-district busing.
When did you leave the city?
I left the city back in '76.
Why did you leave?
I didn't want to live in the city anymore. We bought this piece of property, and we were building a house out here. And prior to that, I was getting kind of, I wanted to try something else. You probably don't realize it, but climbing poles are very hard, and my legs were giving out, and so at that, prior to leaving the city, I did some studying, and I got my electrician's license. It's two different trades. A lineman works on the power systems outside, and electrician works on power systems in buildings. So I decided that's what I wanted to do, and so I got my license to be an electrician. And when I left the city, I had to get another job. So since we were living out here, the road commission in Macomb County, they needed an electrician, so I went to work for them. And I was with them about 19 years until I retired.
Very nice. You called it a riot earlier. Is that how you interpret what happened in '67? You called it a riot.
Yeah, that's the term that was used back then. Because there was a lot of unrest, and there were a number of people who were killed. And So that's the term that people used back then.
Do you still use it today?
Yeah, but I don't talk much about it
Mhm.
today because it's what
49 years ago.
yeah, long time ago.
How do you feel about the state of the city today?
I love the city. We go to church in the city. We take a trip down to Moros every Sunday, and we were going there. We were going there during the riot, and I started going to that church probably when I was 10, maybe.
Mm.
So, and we've been going there ever since.
Are you optimistic for the city moving forward?
From what I hear, I'm very optimistic. I occasionally have an opportunity to do some work in the city as electrician, and sadly, I see so many homes boarded up, vacant, destroyed,
Mm-hmm.
and but the news will tell you that it's coming back, and I really don't know. I don't get downtown very much. I am mostly out in the residential areas where I do work, and there's some sections of the city are very nice, very well kept, and others are, to me, they're run down,
Mm-hmm.
the neighborhoods where people live. So, but I have no apprehension at all of going anywhere in the city as long as the police and National Guard go with me.
Is there anything else you'd like to add today?
Oh boy, I can't think of anything.
Thank you so much for sitting down with me today.
Okay. no
Really
problem.
appreciate it.
Okay.